Welcome into another edition of New Track Record Podcast from the WELT studios. Caleb Hatch and Justin Kinney with you. A ton, and I mean a ton, to dive into an IndyCar world. And I'm not even talking about the Hy-Vee 250s doubleheader at the Milwaukee Mile, which was a successful and thrilling event. We'll get to that here shortly. But man, we have a lot to get to on international races and 2026 schedule and all that we'll get to later on in the episode as well. So a busy week of information as we're a week away from heading into the IndyCar season finale. But first, before all that, hi, Justin.
Hello, Caleb. How are you?
Doing well.
Good.
Staying busy. The football season's here. IndyCar's winding down. All is kind of right in the world.
Yes, it is. We kicked off the NFL season last night as we record here Friday morning, and that game delivered. And I was laying in bed watching that, and I was like, "Oh, what an ending! Who can I text? Who's up?" And then I get a text from you.
Yeah.
Like, all right, well, Caleb's up. So yeah.
I did not anticipate being awake because it was, it ended at midnight basically. But that was a mistake that I made, and I'm dealing with it today. So hopefully I'll get a nap later. But we have so much to get to. No time for a nap or anything in IndyCar. So we'll start with the Hy-Vee Milwaukee Mile 250s. That's the good news. And then we have odd news and we have Mexico Gate, we have, Billboard Gate, and we have Schedule Gate that we'll get to later on in the episode. Well, let's start with Milwaukee. Let's start with a positive stuff.
Sure, let's do it.
Before we even get into our three things, just an outstanding weekend for IndyCar returning to the Milwaukee Mile. Crowds way better than anticipated. I was worried there'd be 10 to 12,000 people showing up per race, and it was definitely at minimum 15, probably closer to 20. Probably a few more people on Sunday compared to Saturday evening. The racing was outstanding. It was an old school IndyCar race, lots of attrition, mechanical issues. You had great side-by-side racing at different parts. Cars actually able to pass lapped cars and weave through lap traffic. What a concept for IndyCar
right?
to have
what
that
a concept, actual tire day. Right?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many positives to take away from this weekend, despite all the outside chatter going in and perhaps the lack of maybe preparation on IndyCar's part. But all in all, I mean, it was a home run weekend in the return. Now, do you want to sell more tickets when it's a standalone race next year and it's not on a holiday weekend? Of course. And I think they will. I think they can draw a big crowd because the product on track was, quite frankly, outstanding.
It was a good return to Milwaukee. That has been one of the focal points of the season as we've approached that weekend. This previous weekend is, what was the crowd going to be look like? What was the racing going to be like? After Iowa, we were very concerned. After Gateway, we felt a little bit better, and Milwaukee did deliver on track and in the crowd. I know that IndyCar officials talked about it and said maybe in a couple years, 15,000 isn't going to be enough. But as you mentioned, going to one race next year, I think is going to help in terms of fill up at least the front stretch of grandstands. So it was a wacky couple of days in Milwaukee, and in a good way, because there was excitement all through the field both days and a good response from fans. So congratulations to Milwaukee. Good job, IndyCar. Good job, IndyCar fans, for showing up as well. You clamored for the return of the Milwaukee Mile back on the schedule, and plenty of people showed up. So great job.
Yeah, they were hoping for 15,000 a day. They got roughly 20,000, what reports said.
Sounded like a really good walk-up crowd.
And I mean, really, it's very weather dependent for a lot of these IndyCar events that aren't, kind of the marquee ones. And if you have perfect weather like they had over the weekend, and you have a good product in race one to deliver more tickets sold for race two, I mean, that's, I think, exactly what happened. So congrats to IndyCar. Congrats to Wisconsin State Fair Park, because they're technically a co-promoter, and Hy-Vee for their support of this event. So next year you go to one race, like you said, got to fill up that main grandstand and even hopefully sell tickets into the turns. Not having it on a holiday weekend, you can have a lot more success, I think, in terms of selling tickets. Now you just hope you can retain a lot of those people, and that a lot of those fans weren't just fans coming from Indy. Make sure you're getting fans from Milwaukee and Chicago and those areas as well who want to come back in year 2. And I think the other positive is 2026, they already added another year, so it's going to be on the 2026 IndyCar schedule as well. So
what
that's
else
good
could be
news.
on the schedule? We'll get to that later.
Yeah. We know some possibilities that won't be on the schedule.
And
maybe we can speculate on some that will be, but that will be later on. So let's get into our 3 things. Now, this is encompassing the whole weekend. We're not doing per race. There's too much that happened.
Right.
But I think number 1, we already talked about. I think for both of us, it's just that the event itself was a success. I think that's our first takeaway, right?
Yeah, for both of us. Like I said, it was a risk to go back and make it work. Andretti tried, and it didn't work. So this was kind of the last gasp. If this didn't work, Milwaukee was never going to come back. And it delivered. IndyCar delivered. The fans delivered. The racing package delivered on track. It was a glowing weekend. You almost kind of wish that it was the season finale weekend, Milwaukee. Now we go to Nashville and guarantee it's going to be a smaller crowd at the Speedway, and you hope that the racing is good. But it was a good weekend for IndyCar and Milwaukee. So I agree. For our first thing of our 3 things for both of us is the weekend itself. What about your number 2?
Yeah, I think my number 2 and takeaways, and man, it's always more challenging when it's a doubleheader,
right?
To kind of put away 2 things. Man, I think my second takeaway is that despite how bad of a weekend it was overall for the team, Christian Lundgaard put together some solid results. 12th on race 1 on the Saturday. Started 25th.
Sunday was 12th.
Oh, you're right.
He finished in the top 10, I think, on Saturday,
yes,
right?
You're right. Race 1, he was 9th. Yes. Started 26th. Race 2, 25th to 12th. That team was completely out to lunch all weekend, and they've really struggled this year. I mean, we thought we'd see Lundgaard maybe win a race or 2 this season because the engineering side seemed to take a step forward the second half of last year. That's not happened this year. And on ovals in particular, they've really struggled. I mean, they had 0 qualifying speed. You look at where they started in some of these races. I mean, didn't they start final 3 spots for one of these races, basically? I mean, Graham Rahal had a decent qualifying run for one of them, but
they were back markers for the majority of the weekend, and it just worked out for Christian Lundgaard in terms of pit cycles to be able to get up there in race 1. But the fact of the matter is, he made chicken salad out of the rest in terms of where the rest of this team was. Graham Rahal finishing 20th and 23rd. Meanwhile, Christian Lundgaard, who has one more race with Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan at Nashville, finishes 9th and 12th, and he's probably not going to get any higher in the points, but for all the struggles all season long and the last couple of years for Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan, Christian Lundgaard has a chance to finish 11th in points, which is pretty impressive.
And I think for him, too, getting oval results, I mean, he's not viewed as a guy who's figured out ovals yet. And I would say a lot of that is just the team has struggled on ovals so much, in particular the last few years. I mean, that's why he left the team and is going to McLaren next year. I'll be really curious to see how he does on ovals with McLaren, who has quick cars at Indy, and they're usually fast on ovals. I mean, obviously, Pato Award won race 1, Scott McLaughlin, Team Penske won race 2. So we'll be with a team who can compete on short ovals. But I was very impressed with what he's able to do, and I get it. A lot of it's just staying out of trouble and avoiding attrition. But sometimes that's how you get good results, and for him, I think it's a huge boost.
It definitely is, and it's going to take some momentum to his next destination at McLaren, no doubt.
Your number 2.
My number 2, let's talk about the survival of Alex Palou. Finishes 5th on Saturday, good enough, and then just absolute disaster to start the race in race 2. Stalls on the track, gets it back to pit road. They originally think it's a hybrid, ends up being a battery issue. They switch batteries and he's fine. But even then, he returns to the track 27th, and we had to put up points as they run every other lap, seemingly. But you saw as the race went on, from Will Power leading to drifting down and down and down, eventually finishing 10th. And the attrition that we saw, so which Alex Palou is going from 27th to 26th, 25th, 24th, finishes 19th, is, it was the survival of Alex Palou and not panicking, I think, was the biggest thing. Even when he got back on track, and this is, we should expect this by now from Alex Palou, it was still cool, calm, collected. They showed him right on the pit boxes. They were trying to figure something out, and he's, smiling and stuff, and he's just kind of rolling with it, rolling with the punches, went out, did laps, didn't get in the way, and ends up coming home 19th, leads the championship by 33 points, I believe, if I'm doing my mental math right. And really only has to finish in the top 9.
Yeah,
8,
ninth or
like
better, he wins no matter what Power does, is my understanding. So
he's only finished 9th or he's only finished worse than 5th this season 3 times. So there's going to have to be a lot that happens for Will Power to even have a chance. But what a performance by Alex Palou. What a performance by that team to diagnose it, to figure it out. As simple of a thing it was in the end, there was no panic there. And we should expect that with Chip Ganassi Racing and Alex Palou. But great job, a championship-saving performance. You can't say that very often about a 19th place finish on Sunday.
And as Joseph Newgarden and Marcus Ericsson were battling and crashing in what I would view as a racing deal,
I don't
race
blame either
one,
one there. Yeah,
was it not Alex Palou who basically dove under and avoided? It's like
it's just one of those. Is he the new Scott Dixon type thing? And
was it that? Was it that, or was it the start of race 2? I can't remember. Well, no, it wouldn't have been the start.
No,
of race
it was
2.
it was the Newgarden
incident.
Yeah,
so
it was.
You got to be lucky to be good, right? And we always talk about this about Dixon all the time, but I think Alex Palou has taken over the reins of that. Just right place, right time, just like at Gateway, right? Where he avoided chaos. So he has found a way to avoid those situations. And yes, you kind of wonder if he's going to be caught up one of those times. But really on the season, I mean, Newgarden punted him at Detroit. He had the battery issue in race 2 at Milwaukee. And then he made a mistake in Iowa race 1. A pit mistake, and then he spun and crashed. I mean, these are all self or team-related things. It's not like he was a victim outside the Newgarden incident. So he's been very lucky in that regard, where he's gotten through these incidents instead of being collected in them.
A little bit of luck and a lot of talent, and that's what's brought Alex Palou to the cusp of his 3rd IndyCar championship in the last 4 years. So really impressive what Alex Palou has been able to do, and it really showed in that race at Milwaukee with the pre-race, even before we went green, from Palou's issues to crashing issues to just absolute chaos on track and attrition on track, and Will Power, where's he, eventually faded. It all worked out in the end for Alex Palou. He's going to be your championship winner here in IndyCar, and you could say the team won it, at least really solidified it, with a 19th place finish at Milwaukee, which is crazy.
Yeah, but again, you get the car going. The day wasn't completely done. If it was a hybrid issue, it would have been.
Right.
And it's crazy how big of a difference that makes. My
What's
number
your
3, I feel like we've gone through this really fast, despite there being so much happening on track.
Well, yeah. It feels like a ways away.
Yeah.
It's Friday.
Yeah.
So a lot has happened, but yeah, what else kind of stood out to you?
Let's talk about Will Power. So he was 2nd in race 1. He didn't have anything for Pato Award, which Pato Award had a very up and down weekend, winning race 1, all the noise going in about promotions and, saying Pato who in victory lane, which was classic. And we'll get to all the nonsense about a Mexico City race and what we learned going into the weekend. But it was a good start for him. And then he had a gearbox issue and finished last in race 2, or excuse me, 24th. But I mean, may as well have been last outside the guys collected in that early start crash. But for Will Power, great race 1, did what he could do. I don't think he thought he had a winning car. But in race 2, so he spins by himself about, 3/4 of the way through. And, okay, he goes to the pits, he gets new tires, but then they changed the front wing. This was a move, to me, that was puzzling. because changing the front wing was going to put him an additional lap down, so he wouldn't be able to get a wave around and be on the lead lap and get his lap back. Now, that eventually happened just because of all the cautions down the stretch. But Pato O'Ward had damage on his front wing at the start of the race, and it was not the damage on his front wing that did him in terms of the gearbox. I guess I just didn't understand the move. Like, I get that the front wing change is going to give him a chance to have a fast car again, but after he spent, I mean, he ended up finishing 10th, but like that's like a best case scenario regardless. Like, why take the unnecessary risk? I guess I just didn't understand the move there.
It was puzzling for sure, especially with how long it takes to change the wing nowadays, having to undo the untether the cables and everything. So yeah, it was kind of a puzzling move. I think it was an opportunity lost for Will Power and that team in terms
he was looking at a sure top 5.
Right. Once Alex Palou had his issues, all efforts for Will Power and that team, Penske, should have been keeping him out front or close to the front. And I don't know if it was a request from Will Power to change the wing. I don't know. It didn't sound like on the radio, but maybe we missed some parts. I don't know.
Like, did we miss seeing damage? Because I really didn't see anything.
Much of anything. And like you said, there was other drivers with more damage on their wings that didn't change it. So it was a puzzling strategy for sure. And it may have been, the camel that broke or what is it? The straw that broke the camel's back. That's the saying. And in terms of Will Power's championship chances, because every position was valuable, obviously, and it was not a good move, and the result showed that it wasn't a good move. Was it more out of caution than anything, thinking we have to make sure this car is tip-top because we have the opportunity with Alex Palou's struggles to really
if
make
there
a move?
was contact with the front wing, which there may have been, but it was very light. It was not noticeable when he pitted that something was like askew.
Correct.
So wildly. Like, this to me felt like you're in a spot where, okay, you spin, now you just need to do whatever you can to collect as many points as possible. So then why are you putting your driver down multiple laps instead of one lap so he can actually compete and race with guys? And look, at that point there had been so much attrition, so you're not going to get a finish that far outside the top 10 anyway.
Yeah,
I guess I didn't understand the move.
It was a question move, especially from a team that always seems to make the right decisions. It was a very puzzling decision.
Yeah, I don't know. It was puzzling to me, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around is that the thing? And let's also not forget, and people pointed this out, the 10 points Power was docked for St. Pete, even though he didn't even use the push to pass button.
Yeah.
I mean, how impactful those 10 points would be. So between this spin and him not doing anything wrong at St. Pete, where he still had access to the software but didn't use it, I mean, we're looking at probably 20, 25 points right there, minimum.
Yeah, minimum. It just goes to show you that every point, whether it's race 1 or race 17, is of utmost importance.
And then on the flip side, Alex Palou, with what he did in terms of collecting points, I mean, he went from getting 5 points to 11 points. So he more than doubled what he was going to get just by going back out there and surviving and all the chaos that ensued afterward.
Most definitely. It was a very, very crazy, topsy-turvy, upside-down couple days for sure. And in the end, you had no driver put together 2 podiums. And we've kind of seen that all the way through the season. The only driver that has had a streak of 3 consecutive podiums is Scott McLaughlin between the 2 Iowa races in Mid-Ohio. So when we looked at Will Power saying, okay, he wins Portland, runner-up at Milwaukee, if he gets another podium, he's right in there. Well, we should have known. Nobody else has done it this year other than Scott McLaughlin. We should have known with Pato O'Ward that it wasn't going to work out race 2. We looked at, even Will Power in race 2 struggling. So it just goes to show you the balance that we've had at the top of the points, top 10, top 12 in terms of performances, and no real dominant stretch for drivers. We haven't had any driver win back-to-back races. We had Alex Palou last year win 3 consecutive races.
Yeah, that's the part that surprised me the most is no one has really taken the championship. It's other people have faltered trying to chase down Palou. Look, at the stat I shared last week is still true. Max Verstappen and Alex Palou both haven't won since June 23rd, but they're still leading their championship. The way it plays out, it looks like both could still win it. I think it's just fascinating that that's how the season's gone.
And you look at the importance of starting off the season right. If you take away thermal, you look at Alex Palou's finishes through Indy, 4th, 3rd, 5th, 1st, 5th. Nobody was able to match that. Some drivers were able to put together solid performances here and there. Will Power 3 runners up over that span, but finished 24th in Indianapolis. You look at Scott McLaughlin was able to win at Barber, disqualified at St. Pete, finished 26th at Long Beach. He's chasing from then on. The only one that really was comparable up till Indy was Colton Herta.
Yep.
3rd, 2nd, 8th, 7th, and then 23rd in Indy.
Yeah, so Indy's spinning on his own. Again, a mistake.
And that's amazing. That's the mistakes you make in May, as big as the Indianapolis 500 are, and how solely focused you are on that race, is hurting drivers here at the end. And you look at it as that start by Alex Palou through the first 5 races really set the tone, and nobody's been able to match him since.
And for Herta, I mean, he was running, 3rd or 4th at the time of that spin? I mean, that was a car that looked capable of competing for the win. And at worst, outside of something happening to him, finishing top 5 or 6. So, like you said, it goes to show you how important it is to be consistent, and it's all about your least bad result. And Alex Palou, yeah, he does have the 23rd at Iowa, but after that, he's got a 16th and a 19th. Will Power, least bad result, 24th at Indy. Scott McLaughlin obviously disqualified at St. Pete. Colton Herta had the 23rd at Indy. That's his worst result. So, I mean,
what has hurt Will Power is 5 races outside the top 10 finishing. That's what's hurt him. That's more than Colton Herta has. So that's what you look at Will Power is, yeah, the 3 wins are nice, but you have finishes of 11th, 12th, 18th, 24th, or 2 18ths, 11th, 12th, 2 18ths, and a 24th. That's what's really killed Will Power in this championship race.
I lost track. Was that your 3?
No, my number 3... We can go in a bunch of different directions here. We can talk about Conor Daly, his performance, particularly in race 1. We can talk more about Santino Ferrucci, a pair of 4th place finishes in this race. But I kind of wanted to go in a different direction and talk about Rinus VeeKay, because I thought he had a couple solid races. And this is a guy that, when we talk about starts to the season, really struggled. I mean, he had an 8th and a 9th early in the year. I think his 9th was at Indy,
yes.
I want to say. And then after that, just fell off a cliff. 14th, 24th, 26th, 19th. But since Iowa, Rinus VeeKay has put together some good finishes. 5th, 9th, 8th, 10th, 11th, 14th, and 7th in race 2 at Milwaukee. What's his future going to be? I mean, do we feel like he's probably heading back to ECR? Could we see him somewhere else? I just feel like maybe this finish to the season for Rinus VeeKay maybe has piqued the interest of a couple teams. Could he land in a better seat next year? Or do you feel like he's a guy that's going to be back at the ECR next year?
That's a great question. I feel like he is a wild card in all the silly season stuff. And at the moment, it feels like everyone's waiting on, what Alexander Rossi announces, and then, other dominoes will fall. But he's the one I feel like I'm most intrigued by outside of course, Rossi, and where they end up. Does he return to ECR, where he's clearly made something out of a team that's been less than competitive last couple years and had a really good season, second half of the season to boot. I mean, that stretch that started with Iowa, he was the only driver in the series to have 4 consecutive top 10s during that stretch. The other drivers that had 3, but none of them had 4. So his results to close the year have been really good. Now, granted, that's mostly come on ovals that he's put together the results. So you kind of wonder, is that why? Not True. That I think of him as an oval specialist. Yeah, he's fast in qualifying at Indy and has had some good results in the 500, but I mean, he's won poles on road courses. He won on the IMS road course for his only career win. I feel like he's worth keeping, but I just kind of wonder, is the budget there? I don't think he's bringing as much funding as he was before. So kind of where do things stand with him? Because I think on the flip side, like, what's a better option,
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think he's going to end up in the 66, and we'll talk more silly season stuff a bit later on. But I mean, I think it's Carpenter, it's Coyne, and it's Rahal. And I would say Carpenter's probably the best option in terms of stability there.
This has been the best stretch of races for Rinus VeeKay in his now 5 seasons.
Isn't that wild?
In IndyCar. Yeah, I know. It feels like year 3 or something for Rinus VeeKay, and he's only still 23 years old. So when we look at him, has he reached the pinnacle or reached the apex of his abilities, or reached the apex of his abilities with Ed Carpenter Racing? And that's the question that I don't think very many people have the answer to, and a lot of people are wondering. If you put him in a more competitive car, can he be competing consistently in the top 10? Or is this all is this what you're going to get from Rinus VeeKay? A guy that's going to flirt with the top 10, probably finish in the 12th, 13th, 14th position, and that's just what you're going to get. I don't know. And I think a fair amount of team owners don't know either. It's going to take somebody to take a real risk on Rinus VeeKay with the expectation that he's going to raise his level of finishes with a better team, but that's no guarantee.
I feel like it's the latter of what you said, because the sample sizes even out in terms of more balance in ovals and road and street courses as we close out the season. And also look at where he's at in standings. He's 14th. He's ahead of Marcus Armstrong and Linus Lundqvist, who are directly behind him in 15th and 16th. That's 2 Ganassi cars. Romain Grosjean in 17th. Graham Rahal in 18th. So, like, he's ahead of some guys that we would expect him to be on the other side of. Maybe not Lundqvist just because he's a rookie, but, like, he's ahead of some pretty stout drivers in terms of the midfield.
Yeah, very much so. So it's a driver that we've kind of discounted at times, but I really think the finish to his season, and to your point, it's been helped by the wealth of ovals in the second half of the season, no doubt. But he's also a guy that largely has kept it clean for the better part of the last couple months. He had a stretch with Road America and Laguna Seca where he struggled, even in Mid-Ohio. But since then, he's really been pretty solid, and I think he's a guy that a lot of people are discounting in the silly season that potentially could be on the move, or could he be back with ECR, or could he be potentially without a full-time ride? I think there's a lot of possibilities, but I think the strength of his last 5 or 6 races can only help him in negotiations.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately for him, it comes down to budgets in terms of him returning to ECR, and then if he goes elsewhere, does he land a ride? Remember, this was one of the guys on the short list for McLaren,
right?
Earlier this season, and then he really struggled in the first half of the season before turning it on at Iowa. So he had such a bad start. He did have a good month of May, despite that crash in qualifying, finished with the top 10, but then had that bad stretch, 14, 24, 26, 19th at Mid-Ohio, before he really turned it on. So it's almost like, did he have the performance lull at the wrong time? Yeah. Because it kind of kept him out of discussions. But I agree with you. I think he is a fascinating piece in the silly season, and based on how he's run, and if he can get another good result at Nashville, I mean, there's a chance that he can finish out of he's 10 points behind Marcus Ericsson in the points for 13th. So there's a chance that he could flip that spot and move up even one more.
It's one of many storylines we're going to have to keep an eye on as silly season continues to come into focus. And as you mentioned, kind of waiting for that key piece to fall into place. Where does Alexander Rossi end up? I think that will be really the impetus of a lot of other things happening.
And we didn't really talk about the winners much. I talked a little about Pato O'Ward. I mean, it was a great performance on Saturday. Obviously, had the gearbox issue on Sunday. Scott McLaughlin had a good run avoided the chaos of the start on Sunday, went on to win. He had a great battle, side-by-side racing with Colton Herta that was phenomenal, the different strategies. And Colton Herta, the result didn't show it in race 1 because the team made a mistake with the wheel, and that crew member was removed.
Oh, was he? I didn't see that.
So they switched crew members for that particular tire on pit stops. But he was looking at 2 top 5s. Obviously, that pit mistake cost him. But Santino Ferrucci, back-to-back fourth-place finishes. Also now, you look at on the season, I believe that's 10 top 10 finishes.
11, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You're right. 10.
10 plus a pole. So he's tied,
Made
I think,
crazy
Ayrton Dare
moves.
for 2002 for the most top 10 finishes for a Foyt car.
Very racy both days. Connor Daly had a great drive on Saturday. Let's talk about
second career podium for him.
Let's talk real quick about that start with the crash. Do you lay blame anywhere? I look at it as it was just a very late wave off by IndyCar.
Yeah, if anything, it was clear they were waving it off, and Lundqvist went. He got penalized, caused the chaos in front of him, and that was that. I feel like it was just a rookie making a mistake.
Yeah, but it also, you heard and I think it was his car, where you hear the spotter say green, 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 yellow, yellow, yellow. So
yeah.
I don't even know if you're placing blame on him.
What are you supposed to do when they do both?
But I feel like
the field was not packed up properly. That's why it was waved off, the back of the field.
But also at the same time, like, if the back of the field isn't packed up, that's their problem, almost. If it's the front of the grid, I get it. But if the back of the grid, if you're not lined up, ready to go, that's your problem. Wave the green. But I also think at a smallish track like that,
it's pretty hard to get lined up.
It's pretty hard to get lined up, and then as soon as they're coming around turn 4, there's not a lot of space between when they start accelerating and the green. And I felt like if you're not waving it off by the time they're in midway through turns 3 and 4, you probably are too late. And I felt like maybe it was a bit too late because everybody is so eager to get on it at the green that unless you're waving it coming out of turn 4 right away, you're going to have an incident. And that's what
they at least had the restart line painted on.
They did.
Not that it really mattered.
So, it's just, can we get to a place where we can have starts and restarts on ovals and just not have issues, whether it's race control, whether it's drivers, whether it's whatever, spotters, whatever. It shouldn't be this hard, guys. But it just added to the chaos before we even saw one lap under green in race 2.
And some records in terms of passing, 763 on-track passes in race 2, season high for this year, most on record of the Milwaukee Mile, 56 passes in the top 5, most on record of the mile, and 63 on-track passes for Santino Ferrucci, most of any driver in the 2024 season. I mean, he was wheeling it and putting his car on the outside, on the inside. He was one of the highlights over the course of the weekend, and I don't think we talked about him enough. There are so many things to choose from. It was like we just kind of had to pick and choose things that stuck out, and there are about 3 other things that stuck out to me.
Where we stand now, this is almost like in every podcast topic. Where we stand now with Santino Ferrucci, do you feel with every good result, is he opening more and more eyes in the paddock, or is he more solidifying his spot with Foyt for next year?
I would hope he's solidifying his spot with Foyt. I think it's also telling that one of the more associate sponsors was the primary sponsor for Portland and Milwaukee. Correct. And I can't remember if they're also Phoenix Investors is going to be on board for Nashville too. I mean, we'll obviously find out with the spotter guide next week, but that I think says something that relationship is developed. I would think you're putting someone on the car because they're seeing results and wanting to pay more money, not just as a favor.
Right.
I mean, you don't put sponsors on the side pods as a favor unless you're that desperate. I don't think that team's in that spot. But to me, all his performances have done of late is reiterate that, yes, Foyt needs to make every effort to hire him to be back in the car. And I think since it seems like Penske himself kind of handpicked Malukas to put in the Foyt car and, have a season or two of growth and development and then move him into a Penske ride. Why not? Why not have Ferrucci back? I get it. It comes down to money, but I really, truly think the Foyt team has turned the corner and people want to race with them. And let's not forget the new TV deal and how much that will help in selling sponsorship. I really think they can make this happen.
I do too.
I didn't think so in the beginning, but I feel like things have changed.
Yeah, and with every good result that Santino Ferrucci comes, I think it's an easier sell for sponsors. And quite frankly, what's the interest? And I'm not saying this is going to happen. I don't see Santino Ferrucci ever driving for Team Penske, but how much does Penske Racing then look at Ferrucci and say, we want him racing for our de facto satellite team because of his performances? And I think that's a potential storyline as well. Is I wouldn't be surprised Team Penske, we don't want to race against this kid. We want him technically in our stable as a de facto teammate, and wouldn't be surprised if Penske was like, hey, here's a couple sponsors that potentially are interested that we don't have room for, or don't have can't be a primary for us, but they could definitely be a primary for AJ Foyt Racing in 2025. And I could see that relationship and further fostering that and helping Foyt find the money for a guy that's not bringing much money to the table. So Santino Ferrucci doing himself plenty of favors seemingly every weekend, and Milwaukee was just the latest.
Yes, and other notes from the weekend in terms of milestones: Scott Dixon, 142nd career podium, passing Mario Andretti, most all time, which is just, it's wild when you're in those. Anytime
you're passing Mario for anything, it's a big deal.
It's a very big deal. So that's impressive. Lewis Foster not only won the race for the series formerly known as Indy Lights, but also clinched the title. So congrats to him, the driver for Andretti. And also, Linus Lundqvist, despite his bad start in race 2, clinched the Rookie of the Year title over Kiffin Simpson, and Chevy clinched the Manufacturer Championship over Honda. So a couple other notes from the course of the weekend.
Very, very interesting stuff as we...
And first team podium for Juncos Hollinger Racing as well.
Pretty solid. Now, when we talk about good finishes helping the prospects of drivers with Santino Ferrucci, what's this do for Connor Daly? I think it further helps his identity as a super sub. I don't think it helps him get a ride.
I would agree. I think he's shown well in ovals, which he's shown well on. He's always been good at Gateway. He's raced well at Indy. That has continued this year. Yes, he's doing it at some other short oval tracks. But I don't know if it's changed the perception. Now, I think if Juncos can put together a package and have him there, yeah, they probably would. But there are so many other drivers looking for rides and on the market. There are too many pieces in play, and unfortunately, I don't feel like he's at or near the top of those pieces that are currently in play in the driver market at the moment.
Yeah, I think so. And as
super sub, yes,
right. As impressive as the third place run, that's just his second top 10 in 6 races this year. For Juncos 13th, 22nd, and 17th, the other 3 races. That's not terrible, but we're not talking about a guy piling up top 10s here.
Now, it's well-timed in terms of him trying to solidify something for the future, and I think he's doing all he can in a less than ideal situation, but that's a team that I think they're going to look very different next year. I think that's a given.
Well, you can make tons of friends with a team if you can help them finish in the leader circle, and that third place finish was huge, as now Juncos 14 points clear of that cut line in the leader circle thanks to that third place performance.
Yes, that's huge, and that's really what it comes down to. And I want to see a leader circle tracker on the graphic, not just a championship
can we
tracker.
Get that? I don't need the championship tracker, especially if there's not a lot of movement. We even saw a Rookie of the Year tracker.
Yeah.
Can we get a leader circle tracker? But no, that's too much to ask right now, apparently. Because then they would have to explain it to people, and, they like to, think they're a bunch of dullards watching, and, oh my gosh, if you flash something up and people don't understand it, everybody's just going to turn the channel in droves. That's why we have to constantly be reminded of, primary and alternate tires. But I digress. I I'm not holding my breath to see the Leader Circle Live standings as they race at Nashville.
We'll get to Mexico and billboard gates. We'll get to 2026 schedule info a bit later on. But first, if you agree or disagree with us on Milwaukee or anything else, we'd always love for you to interact with us. You can find us at newtrackrecordpodcast.com. While you're there on the site, you can subscribe to our email list. It is free. We'll send you a weekly email with new episodes, plus any special announcements that we have. We'll send emails as well. That's free to check out. You can also check out the store. We have t-shirts and stickers available. You can support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. Thanks to Xavier and others for their support on there. And follow us on social media, IndyCar Podcast on Twitter/X, also on Instagram, on Facebook, search for New Track Record. And as always, you can also interact with us via email, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com. Send your questions, comments, rants, concerns, what have you. And download and listen for free on your favorite podcasting platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts, Overcast, CastBox, Player FM, YouTube Music, wherever you find and listen to your podcasts. Okay, mailbag time, Justin, and we have quite a bit to get to that I tried to condense as much as possible, just for time purposes, as I'd like to say. So let's start with Rate the Race. So
Okay.
Race 1, how would you rate the race?
Race 1, I had an 8.
I had an 8.5.
Okay.
I thought it was good. It was entertaining. There was a bit of a lull, though, and it wasn't like a close finish really or anything. What about race 2?
Race 2, I had an 8.5.
Race 2, I'm going to go 9 or 9.5.
Wow.
I'm going to go 9. So listeners rated race 1 an 8.7 and race 2 a 9.1. So yeah, I'll go with a 9 for race 2. I love the chaos of the beginning. We had a lot of attrition. It was a good race. Yeah, it wasn't like a side-by-side finish.
Right.
And we don't give out 10s here for nothing.
We don't do that here.
I don't even think I gave a 10 for the Indy 500. I think I gave it a 9.5.
Yeah, I need a close finish to even approach 9.
I need a close finish to approach a 10.
Yeah, which is fair.
So, like 2015 Fontana, even though it finished under yellow, I mean, that probably gets like a 9.9 or a 10 out of me.
It's very close.
That's kind of the bar in terms of where I see a 10. Or 2014 Indy 500. That's probably as close as you can get to a 10 or a 10.
Yeah, I would say so.
In terms of the racing. So that's kind of our standard. But all in all, people impressed. Great racing, great weekend. Sucks that race 1 was on Peacock only. We didn't get a rating for race 2. We did. People have tipped us off, multiple people. Ratings for Gateway, 537,000 on USA. So I've not seen anything for Portland, right? But that's for Gateway.
Yeah, like nowhere. We've kind of cashed it in knowing that NBC isn't putting anything out.
No.
They've probably already moved on to other things. Yeah, they're checked out for sure. So we haven't seen it, but as you get into the latter half of the season with so much other stuff going on in terms of football, it's kind of difficult. So I think it was a pretty solid 537. Is that what you said?
That's
pretty
for Gateway.
decent.
That's solid. Yeah. Now I think that was technically following in an Xfinity race, right? So you'll take that. $500,000 plus on cable is solid. I don't think that's
we'll
anything to be super excited about, but also nothing to be like, oh, it's terrible. Like there's nothing you can do. So I think that's solid, but that's kind of the last update we'll perhaps get.
Probably.
I mean, will we get one for the finale? Who knows? It's probably not going to be very good.
Big one, I would not think so.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, so that's the latest.
But we know NBC's really kind of checked out.
Yes.
Whatever. We're all just counting the days down till we're with Fox and we can start complaining about that.
Right?
Whenever things come up. So
true.
That's where we're
so
at.
true. Okay, you had posted this. This blew up. We got so many good responses. I'm just going to read off what tracks got the most votes.
Sure.
But you had posted a question. If you could pick a venue not already on the IndyCar schedule as the site of the season-ending race, what would you choose? So Michigan got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 votes. I mean, that's my choice. Michigan, Labor Day weekend. You can draw people because there are still lakes in the area, and you have the 500-mile race on either Sunday afternoon or even Monday, like at noon. I don't know, probably Sunday afternoon would be better.
Yeah.
Start at 4 p.m., have a 500-miler. Texas also got 7 votes. Now, Texas on Labor Day weekend, if it's not a night race, sounds absolutely brutal.
Yeah. And
the problem with that is it would have to start at like 8:30 Eastern, so it's like 7:30 local. So but you also need to finish before 11 o'clock Eastern.
Yes.
So someone else voted for a new oval. There are 2 votes for Watkins Glen, 2 for Chicagoland, another for Chicago Street Race, 1 for Sonoma, another for San Antonio, another for Vancouver. Bring back the Molson Indy Toronto or Vancouver. Richmond. We'll talk about Richmond later on. Cleveland got 4 votes. Pocono 2 votes. Homestead 2 votes. Kentucky 2 votes. Bristol 2 votes. I've been to Bristol.
Me too.
There is no way an IndyCar could race at Bristol.
Absolutely no way.
I can tell you that with absolute
no
certainty.
Way.
It is not possible.
I don't think an IndyCar has ever been on the oval at Bristol.
The banking is too high and the track is too short. Like it is too dangerous.
It's just
the math doesn't math.
No, math doesn't math.
I can tell you that.
No.
2 votes for COTA. Someone said an downtown Indy street course. Mm-hmm. And then someone else voted a return to the IRP Hoosier Grand Prix, which they ran in 1965 or whatever on the road course at Raceway Park.
Let's go. Let's do it.
But a lot of good options.
No, it was great.
What's your vote?
Where I would most like to see IndyCar finish the season, I think I would go Pocono.
Yeah. 500-miler.
And it's similar to the reasons why Michigan would make sense, but the series has been at Pocono recently, so more recently than Michigan, obviously.
And they tried it July 4th weekend.
And if you hyped, we talk about getting back into the Northeast, and Pocono's close-ish to the Northeast. It's good racing. It's a track built for Indy cars back in the day, and it's an oval. So that would be my choice. I know it's not a sexy locale, but that would be my choice. My second choice would be Michigan.
Now, the reality is Michigan as a season finale on Labor Day weekend, it's great as a race for that weekend, but in terms of on a corporate level, in terms of partnerships and for the series, it doesn't work.
Yeah. And
the on-track, yes, would be great, and fans would show up and whatnot.
You would hope. I
mean, they did show up at Milwaukee, so that's a big check.
True.
Check mark there. But the reality is Pocono or Michigan aren't going to be good for sponsors and relationship building and that kind of thing.
Right.
I mean, I understood why they did it at Laguna Seca. Nashville makes sense. Now, having it at the Super Speedway is a little different. Downtown Nashville made sense. But I don't know where that track would be. I guess Texas would be the track, right? Where you can make fans happy because you bring back an oval, and you still also are in a good market for your partners. And I think Texas would be that. But my choice is still Michigan. But I'm just saying Texas would be, I think, the alternative that this series would actually explore.
You just wish there'd be more people at Texas.
And limiting the schedule to the 6 months, I mean, this is the reality.
Yes.
You got to finish by Labor Day weekend. If you're not going to go till early October, Texas would be great in early October to run weather-wise. But I think, and Cup's not even running that second Texas race, right? So
correct.
They just race next season in early May. I mean, that seems like a decent option, but they're not gonna run past Labor Day. That's part of the Fox TV deal, so that's where they are limited. Other stuff in terms of the mailbag. A lot of discussion on future schedules. Of course, my computer freezes up here as I'm trying to pull up the original thing on this. But there's just, I think we have so much to take away from Mexico and everything that's happened in terms of where that stands. So let's see if I can get this to work again, as I had it working.
So we didn't talk about the announcement of Cup going to Mexico City.
Yes.
We teased it last.
We teased it. We knew it was coming.
We thought maybe there would be an IndyCar element, but of course there wasn't.
There was not.
And there was a lot of outcry because Pato Award and trying to get back to Mexico and all that stuff. And then, of course, NASCAR wins the race to Mexico.
So here's where things get curious. And this is Mark Miles' comments. Mark Miles said, we think it's too early or not well enough known yet to be in Mexico City. Now, granted, that comment in particular was back in 2021 when they were starting to first explore this. Pato was a race winner, and it was challenging for his first championship contention season in 2021. But a lot of people had comments on this. Historic Hot Lap said, what a wild statement. You can't go to a single event where there isn't a Pato wave of fans. The longer Penske Entertainment is in charge of the series, the more I worry about the future of IndyCar. OBX Jody saying the IndyCar series isn't going to start a potentially challenging project. My take is this: the TV deal is in place. The charter project is getting done. To me, the series is about to be sold. They'll let the new owners of the home decide whether they want to add square footage. I would, in theory, tend to agree with you, but that Penske's been very adamant. And I get it. People can always say, oh, we're not selling. I mean, look at any football coach saying they're not taking another job, and then they take it. But I just think it's a situation where, yes, they're getting all their ducks in a row, but do you really feel...
Like, how long does that take?
Yeah. We've been at this for how many years in terms of trying to go to Mexico? And these are the comments that really, I think, set everyone off by Mark Miles, the IndyCar CEO. I'll say that it's clear that Pato isn't as famous as the last previously famous Mexican driver, Adrian Fernandez, but he's really gaining ground, and he's actually on some billboards now. So that's where all the billboard jokes come from.
Right.
Granted, there was a billboard right outside the Milwaukee Mile that was advertising NASCAR trucks that came the prior week to IndyCar. Nothing for IndyCar. Someone I did see had found a billboard in the Milwaukee area in a neighborhood.
Yeah.
And nothing about it mentioned there was a race. It was highlighting the concerts over the weekend. The only way you would have known there was a race because there was the Hy-Vee 250s logo, but it featured the concerts at the Milwaukee Mile. So find that fascinating. Then. But here's the thing. So Adrian Fernandez, is he more popular in Mexico at that time, like 30 years ago, than Pato is right now? That's debatable. Now, obviously, Pato Award is way more popular in America. And here's the thing. If we're really trying to rank popularity, Pato Award gets mobbed when he goes to Hermanos Rodriguez for F1. In fact, he can't even go into the stadium section anymore because it's too crazy. So I have a lot of issues with the comment, and that was comment one of kind of like egg on the face for Mark Miles in the last week, basically. And then some drivers even chimed in. Felix Rosenquist, obviously a former teammate of Pato's, kind of replying to all this, said in Long Beach, when we did engineering debriefs, we needed to talk through intercom in the truck because the Pato fans were so loud outside the truck. We also did random Kroger events where fans would line up for a mile. He said, to see me and Rossi, I'm pretty confident any Mexican race would sell out. And then Alexander Rossi also chimed in on all this, saying reasons why I can think why Pato Ward is actually as famous as he thinks he is. I'm sitting on my couch. As fan base is so loud when they chant, we can't actually complete an engineering debrief in Portland, of all places. Needs his own merchandise tent because people buy out the official one of all his gear. Specific team-only activations in Hispanic neighborhoods that I've attended have been made to feel like a superstar just because I'm next to Pato. 6-time social media following of the Indy 500 winner, Joseph Newgarden. The only driver that I know of.
6 times more followers?
Yes. Like on Instagram, he has more followers than the series has. The only driver that I know of that, despite his questionable taste, can have a partnership and make inroads with the fashion industry. And then number 6 has a jet. And Rossi said, kidding. But Pato does have a jet. He literally bought a jet. I remember this happening in the offseason. So even the drivers are chiming in on this. And Miles doubled back and and said, Pato's a natural star. His popularity is tremendous and growing. It's unfortunate that a few of my additional remarks failed to convey anything other than this viewpoint. But like, why are you comparing here? There's a Pato Award P1 for Mid-Ohio in Mexico City.
The series isn't different. Trying to compare IndyCar to 30 years ago is like apples and oranges. Okay?
Yes.
So stop doing it anyway. It just wild to me. Here's what it comes down to, in my opinion. IndyCar just doesn't want to front the money.
Yes.
To just say, like, just don't instead say stupid stuff that can easily be disproven. Instead, just say, you know what? We don't feel like we can make the money back that we would have to invest to promote and operate and basically rent the track. And at least that's the truth. Now, you could openly question when you have a billionaire owner why you can't do it. But pretty much what NASCAR is doing is renting the track.
IndyCar was literally offered to rent the track.
And that's the thing.
IndyCar said no.
So that is the thing. IndyCar just doesn't want to spend the money. Whether you agree, disagree, and say it's easy to spend because it's not our money, blah, blah, blah. I get it. But that's what it's coming down to. So you would think that Mark Miles could come up with a better lie than what he did. Or he could just tell the truth and say it doesn't make financial sense for IndyCar to rent and promote a race in Mexico City right now. That's the truth. Whether you agree or disagree, that's the truth. Just tell the truth instead of trying to come up and spin some weird comparison to Adrian Fernandez and 30 years ago and blah, 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 and question the popularity of Mexican drivers. Just tell the truth.
And listeners agree. Kojo617 said IndyCar is too scared to lose $1 trying to make 10, so they just sit on their hands. Also, Lynn_IndyCar said, I guess these new events from Penske don't count in this time frame. Detroit Road Race, return to Milwaukee, amazing event in Iowa, which NASCAR noticed and started going to a track they own for the first time. Media love to attack Roger and his management. But here's the thing, like you're going back to, like, you're not doing new stuff here. You're returning. And then we'll get to what Mark Miles said about returning. Jeremy from HBG said, there are other logistical things that people are leaving out of the equation. If I remember correctly, Champ Car spent a ton of money on security to convoy the haulers to the Mexico races. But you can bake that into the sanctioning fee if they're willing to pay. Here's the thing.
They're not paying, though.
They're not paying.
That's the thing.
IndyCar could have rented that track. Also, why is the discussion solely focused just on Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez? There are other tracks. You could stage a street race in Monterey. They used to race at Fundidora Park, right? Which is Pato's hometown.
But I mean, did either one of those?
There's the Oval in Puebla where you probably need upgrades. But like, you can't just limit yourself just to Mexico City. I get that that's the market, but there are other markets.
But if that's the only market that's open, and that's the big thing that we're going to talk about here shortly too with 2026 schedule, if those markets aren't interested in hosting IndyCar, it's easy to say, well, why aren't they racing in Monterey?
Mexico City's not interested, but IndyCar could always rent the track, and that was an option.
Well, and that's the thing. And I think, too, it just comes down to telling the truth. As long as you tell the truth, whether you agree or not, it's the truth. But Mark Miles is not telling the truth in this respect. He could factor in, too. Well, we look at the fee, and we look at the amount of money that it would take to rent the facility, and security can be part of it, and you could talk about that. All the teams getting down, crossing the border, all that stuff, blah, 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 and say it doesn't make financial sense for us. Just tell the truth. And then, two, what are the races that are being promoted by IndyCar right now?
Iowa, Detroit, Milwaukee, in partnership. I mean, that's technically the State Fair Park board.
Okay.
But IndyCar is assisting them. Obviously, the Indy 500.
Now, my question would be, outside of the 500, with the races that are being promoted by IndyCar / Penske Corp, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, is maybe could IndyCar be losing its ass promoting those races?
Outside the Indy 500?
Correct.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, Detroit, they always brag about all the corporate partners that they get with suites, and Iowa, you know, they have the concerts, and obviously Hy-Vee's fronting a lot of money for that. Yeah. I forgot the IMS road course race is also promoted by Penske.
But could that be a situation where IndyCar is going, look, we're looking at a third of the schedule that we're already promoting. We're not making a lot of money outside of the 500 on these races, if any. And I'm speaking as a hypothetical here. I don't have any proof of this. We can't afford to promote another race because we're struggling to promote these existing races outside of the 500 that we're involved in that aren't making a ton of money. That's a perfectly acceptable excuse. It's just IndyCar instead, and Mark Miles in particular, just wants to weave some fake story and try to pull a fast one on us and think that nobody's going to tear it apart. And that's why he had to circle back and kind of explain himself. Just tell the truth. Whether it's, hey, it's too much money, whether it's, hey, we don't think it's fiscally responsible to do that right now. If it's, hey, we're having a problem turning a profit on the existing races we do promote. Whatever the truth is, just say it. And then we'll deal with the truth, whether you agree or not. Instead, you're just treating your fans like morons.
Well, and the part that's really hard for me to wrap my head around is Pato O'Ward's dad. So CIE, that's like the initials. I'm not going to try to say it in Spanish, but they're the promoter for races at Hermanos Rodriguez, that track. They're, I think, working with NASCAR. NASCAR is a promoter, but I think they're also working in partnership. So they were out. So Pato O'Ward's dad goes and make the contacts, says he's going to promote it. Pato's going to help promote it as well, obviously. And look, Pato's done this at other tracks. He had like his Pato Fan Zone and then Pato Suite at Texas previously. He's doing a deal for a Pato fan section at Nashville, and for his store, every $75 spent, you get a free ticket for Nashville, and that includes, you buy a sombrero, which is $150, the Pato sombrero. Nice. So there's 2 tickets, right? He has the Pato Who hat now in the Pato shop as well. So like, you can't say he's not trying to promote stuff. He's doing more than other drivers in terms of trying to galvanize fans to go to some of these events. So Pato's dad had everything lined up. And then IndyCar apparently didn't realize that Ricardo Juncos was acting as the representative and speaking with Mexican officials in terms of that. And so IndyCar instead moved it to Ricardo Escoto's dad, who a driver in Indy Lights, to be the contact. But it's like, so Pato's family done all this legwork to try to bring this race in, and IndyCar's like, oh, sorry. And Mark Miles even kind of like doubled down and like, oh, I bet he's disappointed we haven't talked to him. It's like, yeah, you think?
Yeah, right?
Like, here's the thing. Like, CIE said to Miles, if you want to rent the track, you can rent it. But, and this is 3 years ago, but their view was Pato O'Ward wasn't well enough known, which I still would debate that. He certainly is now.
Definitely.
So maybe 3 years ago, that's debatable, but now that's not the case. And then his family does all this legwork, and Penske Entertainment's like, no thanks. It's just like, I don't understand. And I get people are going to say, or trying to say, well, Miles, or his comments are about Adrian Fernandez. That's from 21. No, those are separate things. Like you're separating stuff to feed a narrative. But it's so frustrating that, F1 gets the race in Miami and Las Vegas, and Chicago, and NASCAR gets the Chicago street race. Now they're going to Mexico City. It's like IndyCar, you have all these opportunities, and you invested $60 million in IMS since Penske took over. You invested like $8 million at the Milwaukee Mile to get it up to speed. So you're willing to invest, but you're not willing to invest in some of these game-changing things, these transformational events that IndyCar is still lacking. They had one, but no one actually did the legwork to check into whether it was possible to run a street race in downtown Nashville.
Whoopsie, at least once construction of the new stadium started. A couple things on this, and you look at the in that NASCAR had. Remember, NASCAR Mexico. They have a series that runs in Mexico with Salvador de Alba that won the championship last year, who runs in Indy next. They race at Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. So that gave NASCAR an in already. They have a satellite series that runs in Mexico. So that's a leg up in terms of making things happen. And two, man, how tough is it going to be if, and this has been said by Denny Hamlin, trying to get Pato O'Ward at least in the Xfinity race in Mexico City. So you could have Pato O'Ward racing a stock car in Mexico before he races an IndyCar in Mexico. Very tough optics that'll be if that does come to fruition.
The series shut down Pato TV, which was his onboard for races, where he's got thousands of subscribers. Like I just like, and I get that there are like conflicts and stuff, but like these are the kind of little things where find a way to make it work instead of shutting it down.
Well, and there are a bunch of little things that add up to be a big thing.
Yes.
Your most popular driver is a Mexican. You should be doing everything you possibly can to have a race in that person's home country. And we're not talking about Scott Dixon and trying to race in New Zealand, okay? Or Finland or something, okay? It's Mexico. It's right across the border.
It's North American. IndyCar says we're a North American series.
It's like you're not trying to go. It's
you
not
race
like
in Canada,
and
you race in the U.S.
Japan.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
Mexico.
logistically you can make it work.
And now when is Cup racing in Mexico City?
I think in June.
Because and I saw this, and yeah, it's Reddit, so believe it. They're being thrown around these early April dates.
Yes.
Have you seen this starting in 2026? What's that all about?
So AP, so potential dates, and this bleeds into, and we've kind of switched from the mailbag to just doing straight up news stories, because there really is not a whole other lot of stuff I want to get to on the mailbag anyway. So we'll just move forward. But those early April dates. So essentially Mexico is going to be early April before Long Beach. That's the potential dates at play. But again, Pato's team laid out a whole plan for Penske Entertainment in terms of promoting and helping out, and basically said it's been one-sided. And that's the part that just boggles my mind. Scott Dixon said, I think it's a massive miss. I don't know how that happens in terms of NASCAR beating IndyCar there. I mean, look, Pato O'Ward's from Monterey. Daniel Suarez also is from Monterey. So, like, this is IndyCar just coming up short on an opportunity here.
Pato O'Ward is more popular than Daniel Suarez.
Yes, by far.
And it's not a close.
No.
It is just, and unfortunately this is reality, is NASCAR is more willing and in a better position to invest in events to try. Whether you go Clash, whether you go Chicago Street Race, and now Mexico City, NASCAR is A, more willing, and B, more willing to spend the money and take a risk.
That's what it comes down to. IndyCar is so risk averse on something that could be transformational. And they keep teasing about there's going to be this massive thing in 2026.
Is Dallas really exciting you? Like
a Dallas street race does not excite me, because you have an oval across the way in Fort Worth. It's perfectly suitable for IndyCar.
They're going to prop that up because it's a top 5. Is it 4? The Metroplex? Is it the 4th biggest?
4th or 5th, yes, market.
That's what they're leaning on. And they're going to say, look at this. We have a race in a top 5 market or top 5 metropolis in the country. And I'm just like, okay. That's exactly what's going to happen. That's this long rumored race. We talked about it potentially being San Antonio.
We thought San Antonio.
It's Dallas.
Denver was another one, but you're obviously not running a race in Denver in that time frame between St. Pete and Long Beach. It's not feasible. Salt Lake City, same deal, which I think those are all 2 great markets for IndyCar.
So we think those early April dates are referring to Dallas and not Mexico City.
So the Mexico dates would be April 12th, 4th, and 2nd. April 12th, 2026, 4th and 27th, 2nd and 2028.
And
that's the letter written by Miles that the AP and Jennifer reviewed to the operators at Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez.
So there is a possibility that this happens in 2026. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
But at that point, is it too late?
No. I don't think so. It's better to be late to the party than don't go to the party at all, in my opinion.
Well, in Pato Ward, it said he'd promote it himself, but he doesn't have $5 million to just blow, and understandably so. Like, I don't think anyone is saying he should promote it.
But I think the best possible thing too is Pato Ward isn't racing for an also ran in the series. How much would McLaren want to be part of promoting that race and promoting its top driver?
Yes.
And building some sort of, hey, we'll put in $5 million in promoting this race.
McLaren could promote a race featuring a star driver better than anyone in Penske Entertainment. Am I wrong?
They got a deeper coffers, or at least deeper pockets in terms of what they're willing to spend.
And this goes back to Zach Brown talking about marketing, right? McLaren's a marketing machine.
If this happens in 2026, it's better than not happening at all. My question is IndyCar interested in having the Dallas race be that early April race as opposed to Mexico City?
Dallas in early April, if it's not a night race, that gets into the 90-plus degrry. It's too hot.
Already in April? You live down there in Texas.
No, March the weather's good, usually. I mean, the winter, you can have warm days and then ice storms, and everyone loses their power because the power grid's a mess. But I would say mid-March would be ideal in terms of looking for a street race.
I just worry that the early April dates that are being floated could potentially be Dallas instead of Mexico City. I hope it's Mexico City.
I do too.
It better be. It's like, it's okay that NASCAR, quote unquote, beats you to Mexico. It's a loss, but it's if you refer to it, it's a battle, not a war. Okay. So you can still win the war and meet your goals by going to Mexico City or going to Mexico in some capacity at some point. You're not going to be there first, but it's better to be second than last. Some would argue, or second than not qualifying at all, not competing at all. So it still needs to be a priority, despite Cup getting there, quote unquote, first. But you could still say that IndyCar still has the most marketable North American Mexican driver outside. He's bigger than Daniel Suarez.
Well, and I guess the thing that comes down to is Pato Ward's exploring an Xfinity ride with 2311 in terms of racing in the Xfinity Series race in Mexico City. Cup wouldn't be possible just because Gateway's that same weekend, and I'm sure McLaren would be willing to have Pato miss qualifying and start last for that race on an oval, or that's a sacrifice worth making in terms of promoting your driver and everything. And I get it. Within the championship, like, you don't want to risk that, but look, Kyle Larson took that risk in Cup. He got the waiver. It worked out. So I don't think it's outside of a huge risk in terms of missing that, but they're trying to make something happen, and props to them because they should.
As they should. It's tough to compare now. Overarching topic, or really the space look, the aerial look of this is NASCAR has a lot more money to take risks and finance risky events. Chicago being a prime example. IndyCar, despite their owner being a billionaire, and that's a separate conversation whether you're saying he should be spending more or not, because it's not our money. It's easy for us to say. But the fact of the matter is NASCAR is in a better financial position to try things than IndyCar. And this is just the latest example. Yeah.
And again, the ball is rolling because that letter that I talked about earlier, it was sent on July 1st. They're trying to negotiate, and the promoters got confused because Juncos was reportedly representing himself in Mexico as the exclusive rights holder of IndyCar in Latin America, and so they worked that out.
I mean, IndyCar has to have a meeting
now
with Juncos, right?
Ricardo Escato's dad and Michelle Jourdain Jr. in terms of the designated proxies, if you will. But yeah, the whole thing's a mess. Pato's going to end up racing Xfinity, and NASCAR will get the buzz out of that. IndyCar will not.
IndyCar, if they were forward thinking. If they can, let's say Mexico City for 2026, they could use Pato Award 2025 in Xfinity and use that to, hey, we're bringing Pato Award here next year in his natural environment in open wheel racing for a 2026 race and promote that. Probably won't happen, but just throwing it out there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to be said. And we've said
a lot.
All there is to say about that particular thing.
In other Mark Miles news.
Yeah, so we moved from one Mark Miles comment that has caused an uproar to another. So this was today, Friday, as we record. This article came out, the Indianapolis Star, IndyStar.com, if you want to access it, talking about future schedules. So obviously the 2025 schedule already came out. That was a big win. And now the discussion has moved forward to 2026. So let's talk about the good in this. And that's the fact that we talked about this potential new market race that is a strong possibility. Now, we think it's Dallas. That seems to be the overarching guess. Denver, Salt Lake City, San Antonio have been other places mentioned.
It could be multiple places, but in terms of this impact,
or is it Mexico City or a race in Mexico?
Not based on what Mark Miles had to say.
Exactly.
To Nathan Brown.
Correct. So the positive is they're going to get back in a market. That's one of the ones that we know. Now, Miles said the one after St. Pete is going to happen. I'm quite confident. The series is looking to add multiple new blockbuster events in urban markets, aka street races, with the help of unusual partners. So
what's that mean,
that's a start. Proposed dates for Mexico City, we went over those. So that would be in April, early to mid-April in future years. So there's a positive. We think it's Dallas. Okay, we'll move forward. Now, here's where we have issues with what Mark Miles has
Not
said.
just us.
Yeah, fans in general. And this is where he kind of loses me, because he said, we're not going back to places like Richmond. You've got to get your head out of the old us. I don't want to go to places that we've been, and I think I'm winning that battle. We recently had a conversation where somebody said they want us back at Watkins Glen. And instantly someone said, oh, yeah, that's great. No bleeping way. We've got to quit being what we've been. We have to show some innovation. So, no, this isn't one we've been to. Okay, you just returned to Milwaukee. I mean, read the room.
Yeah, I know, right?
Read the room.
I just picture Nathan Brown getting these quotes, and he's like, man, I can't wait to publish this story.
It's like you were literally just at a market you returned to for the first time in 9 years, and then you say, we're not going back to places like Richmond. Okay.
Again, the context is everything. If Mark Miles would come out and say, certain people keep mentioning, you say, okay, people keep mentioning Watkins Glen and Richmond, but those tracks have not approached us to potentially, for us to return. Perfectly acceptable answer. But instead, he just comes out and is like, oh, we're not interested in going back there. And we've said it multiple times before. Anywhere that IndyCar is wanted, they should be going to. Try to figure it out. Now, could you say we're already subsidizing / promoting too many events, and to do Richmond would be all on us or majority on us, and it's just not? That's a perfectly acceptable answer. Instead, he's like, oh, we're not interested in going back to old venues after you just left an old venue. It's just so stupid. Like, read the room, dude.
Yeah.
Are you that stupid?
It's kind of appalling. Like, it makes
you
you wonder,
like, where's the PR person?
Yeah, I
for
said to you
IndyCar?
before we started recording, like, after the comments about Pato and the billboards last week, do you think there was some kind of like, oh, let's make sure we have a PR person in interviews with Mark, or kind of review like, hey, here's how we handle this better. But now we're going to have another day where we're probably going to have another Mark Miles issued statement because of the comments. And here's the thing. He's experienced in sports and marketing, and like he was doing a lot for tennis internationally and expanding events for a long time before he came to IMS and IndyCar. It's not like he's clueless on this stuff, but it's just so shocking how tone deaf that comment's going to come across the fans, especially in the context of just racing at the Milwaukee Mile. Now, again, the new event, we know it's not Salt Lake City or Denver just because of weather, right? That eliminates those markets. So it's either, or excuse me, I said Dallas. I meant Denver. So it's Dallas or San Antonio. That's the guess, assuming Mexico is separate in all of this, which it is in terms of what they're talking about. But is that really a new market? Like, you're going back to a market. It's not Denver. We don't think it's Salt Lake City. And it's not Mexico. So like you're actually going back to a market, but it's a different race. Like, is it Houston? You know, they've had street races in Houston before.
Right. And what we're picturing is, and maybe you can better explain this for me. I mean, where would they race in Dallas? Like around the Cowboy Stadium? Like in Arlington?
No,
or would you be downtown? Are they going to go through Daly Plaza?
They could.
That'd be interesting.
It would. No, I don't think they're going to race in Arlington. Now, that would be an ideal spot because it's in the center area of the Metroplex, because you're between Dallas and Fort Worth. You have Cowboy Stadium. You have Six Flags Over Texas. You have Globe Life. What is it? Globe Life Park now instead of Field because they built the new one. That's all in Arlington. Maybe. I don't know. But Miles is saying they don't want to get to 20 or 25 races, but like you got to get rid of some double headers here. I don't know. But this new race could be announced by the end of the year. That's what Miles said.
Okay.
So we're looking at a timeline. So the one after St. Pete's going to happen and expected to be announced at the end of the year. But it's not Richmond. So it can't be Richmond or Phoenix or Pocono or, any of those kind of places. But
okay.
I find the comments frustrating because you just did what you said you weren't going to do by returning to Milwaukee. And also in the article, and this is a really good read, the comments are the headline grabbing stuff, and rightfully so. But they're talking about international races again. Yay. The good news is it's an all or nothing in terms of getting 3 to 4 and putting the package together or not. And Fox wouldn't be guaranteed the rights to air those races in the U.S. They'd obviously get first look at it, but it would have to be, outside the schedule of the season. All this makes sense. Will it ever happen? Because again, Mexico City would not qualify in terms of their international, like how they view themselves as a North American-based series. But they could do South America, Australia, Japan. I mean, there are a lot of options mentioned here.
I guess my thing is, with an international series not part of the championship, is what's the desire? If I'm a team owner, why do I care? I could potentially do millions of dollars worth of damage to cars, not to mention paying to have my team go to these countries for what? Is there going to be a huge monetary reward?
There has to be. I mean, that's the only way it happens. You have to have transportation costs covered. Hello, DHL. You have to have a promoter willing to fork over the money. And then you have to have some incentive for the teams because a lot of their sponsors may not be featured in these countries or available. And so is it, it's limited to the top 22, leader circle or top 20? Like, how do you make that work?
To me, I look at it like where's the interest for me? It's not very high on, let's say, 3-race international series that goes in November and December, or there's 1 race in November, 1 race in December, 1 race in January. Okay. That's not really exciting to me. And I don't see too many team owners that it's going to excite either. Let's take Mike Shank, for example. What would his team gain from a 3-race international series? If you win that 3, what's the reward? If I finish 8th, what's the reward? I don't know. What's the incentive for doing that? And that's really my big question. That hasn't been answered. You can throw around international series all you want. Oh, 3 races in the off season. Okay, what's the point? Other than just having races in new markets. just
you got to have a monetary prize,
big one.
Like you win $1 million for leading the exhibition series champion, like points champion, that kind of thing, or you get so much money to win each race, or like you said, there has to be incentive, and that's why this is so far from happening.
I just don't understand A, the incentive for teams, and B, the interest of the casual IndyCar viewer. I'm sorry, in December, IndyCar's off the radar for me. If there is a race in Argentina at 3:00 in the afternoon on Sunday, December 16th, I'm sorry, I'm watching NFL over that. I may turn it on at some point, but I'm like, it's an off-season exhibition. What do I care? And I feel like a fair amount of the teams will say the same thing.
Also, saying to fans who are clamoring returns to places like Michigan and Pocono and Kentucky and Cleveland and Texas Motor Speedway and saying, you've got to get your head out of the old us. But at the same time, all the series has done in the last decade is return to Road America and Portland, and then leave Iowa for a year, come back, go back to Gateway, go back to Milwaukee, Laguna Seca. Like, it's like, which is it here?
Well, and this is the proper way. Again, this comes in with the PR. Where's the PR person trying to talk Mark Miles through this? A guy that shouldn't have to be talked through this is saying, you know what? If somebody came to us with a plan to promote and execute an event at fill in the blank, Michigan, wherever, and it made sense for our teams and our series, we would consider it. Instead, he just says, we're not going back anywhere. Like, you can say, there's no interest in several of these racetracks of IndyCar returning. If Watkins Glen would call us tomorrow with an idea and we examined it and we felt like it was good for the series and good for the track, we definitely would entertain it. What's so hard about saying that? Instead, he's just like, you need to quit worrying about Milwaukee or, Michigan. Like, he keeps saying Milwaukee, thinking it's an old track of old, and they just raced there twice. Michigan, Watkins Glen, all this stuff. What is so hard about saying if there was a proposal, we would look into it? But no, he sounds like a douche, quite frankly, doesn't he?
It's very tone deaf. I don't know what else to say.
And how often are these foot and mouth things going to happen with Mark Miles before Roger Penske is like, dude, you need to go?
Twice in essentially 1 week is shocking.
Because while you may have frustrations with Penske Corp with how they run things, and this may be frustrating too in that they don't talk as much as you would like, I think Penske Corp's going to start looking at Mark Miles and saying, you're talking too much, and you're saying the wrong things in the wrong tones.
Don't be a talking Terry Angstad, right? Blast from the past for new IndyCar fans.
Absolutely.
You're going to have a street race in China.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. Can we get less Mark Miles and more Jay Fry, please?
Yes.
I don't get it. And it goes back to Nathan Brown when he was getting these quotes. I have to think as a former journalist, like his eyes getting bright. Yeah,
probably rubbing his hands together. Like, ooh, this is good stuff.
When am I going to drop this? Aha, Friday. That'll be brilliant.
It's all about clicks anymore in online journalism. Sure, you're going to get a lot of clicks.
He did not have to do much of anything to spice up this story outside of just publishing Mark Miles's comments. What a doof.
We're going to move on because we have other things to get to and we're running out of time. Let's get into some silly season stuff. So the latest, Chip Ganassi Racing, they're going to keep their 5 entries, 3 in IndyCar, 2 in the series formerly known as Indy Lights. So that keeps those crew guys, those people staffed, especially as their IMSA program goes away. This makes a lot of sense. We should have known they were the team expanding. With that, Mike Shank expects to have his lineup confirmed by early October. I would guess Marcus Armstrong, Linus Lundqvist, those guys mentioned by Shank. Also, Lewis Foster in play. They talked to Alexander Rossi. Some of the reason it isn't done yet is budget driven. I would say that rules out Rossi for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Louis Foster has to end up somewhere. Not in a full-time
he brings significant funding, basically $1 million. I would guess Marcus Armstrong goes there. Linus Lundqvist gets farmed out somewhere else by Ganassi. So that's the latest on that crop of drivers.
Do you think with Ganassi, which is great news, this was the biggest part of this news, was getting back into Indy Lights, in my opinion. Does that make Ganassi now the team to beat in Indy Lights, or do you feel like it's going to take a year to get back into it?
Depends on who they hire for drivers, I guess.
Yeah.
I have no clue what they're going to do. I mean, they're obviously open for
If you're
for
a driver, does that become the destination where you want to go? It does, in my opinion, because you have a direct bridge into one of the top teams in IndyCar.
Yes, the problem is their seats are spoken for, at least definitely for next year and possibly the year after. I mean, Kevin Simpson's going to be in that third Ganassi seat.
But you could, at the very least, gain a 3-race, 4-race, maybe an Indy 500 seat or something with Ganassi. I believe it becomes now maybe. No, I definitely I believe it becomes the destination team for drivers.
Elsewhere, in terms of looking at drivers, so all the rumors point to Marcus Armstrong, the 66. Obviously, Linus Lundqvist still under contract with Chip Ganassi Racing. He'll go somewhere. I have heard Rossi to Rahal in the Hy-Vee entry. I've heard Rossi to Juncos Hollinger. So there's a lot of conflicting stuff. Stingray Robb, he's going to end up somewhere. Could he end up at the 30 seat at Rahal? That from Tony Donahue is a possibility, along with Rossi to the Hy-Vee car. Those are other options.
Man, if you're
Teo Porcher also still working on stuff. He's a possibility.
Also had some pointed comments
in F1
being unfair in F1 with other drivers getting shots and not him.
Yeah.
How much of a flub up will it be for Alexander Rossi if he turned his back on, let's say it's a 1-year deal for McLaren, and instead ends up at Rahal or Juncos? That's a terrible, terrible drop down. Particularly Rahal. Like, I put Juncos above Rahal right now in terms of where I'd want to be.
I mean, he's an Indy 500 contender year in and year out, and you're going to one of the worst full-time Indy 500 teams.
All because you had more value for himself. Like, go out and prove that you can be a guy that can have a better performance than 1 win in 5 years with McLaren in 2025 and use that for a multi-year deal for McLaren or otherwise. Instead, you turned your back on it. And now your options may be a team that has to fight to make the Indianapolis 500 and a team that is very, very off the radar in terms of competing for wins and championships in Juncos. They're improving, but they're not there. It's going to be a bad, bad situation for Alexander Rossi where he ends up if it's with one of those two teams.
Yeah, I would agree. It feels like he kind of missed his opportunity.
Definitely. I mean, it's good to have confidence in yourself, but when it borderlines on arrogancy, is that word arrogancy? On
it
arrogance,
is now.
On arrogance.
Yeah, that's a word.
Then and it hurts your chances of being competitive. Then you have to look in the mirror and be like, man, I screwed up.
Meanwhile, Kyle Larson, Hendrick Motorsports, in discussions on a 2025 return to the Indy 500. So we knew it was a 2-year deal with McLaren, but apparently the second year is an option. So they're trying to put together a package for all of that. Decision on Indy could come as soon as next week. So we'll see on what happens with Larson and the return to Indy. Other notes, Jay Fry posting new lighter chassis in the works. So we'll see when that happens. Hopefully sooner rather than later. IndyCar charter system. It's set to be mailed to team owners for signatures. In fact, probably being mailed or already mailed as we speak. Everything should be formally announced after the season finale. Remember, it's going to be announced by Carb Day, right? More bad news in future tracks. Iowa Speedway not be repaid further next season. The quote says it all. We were unsure that what that was going to look like from a competition perspective, but the feedback was overwhelmingly positive from the fans, from the teams. That, of course, is the NASCAR perspective.
Well, I don't necessarily look at it as Iowa's responsibility to make the IndyCar show better. I put it on IndyCar to make the show better. And I think that is where the priority needs to go. Quite frankly, Iowa Speedway doesn't owe IndyCar anything, in my opinion.
I don't disagree. Tony Donahue posting rumblings of an IndyCar test in the offseason at Richmond and Phoenix.
Those are old tracks. Why are we going back to old tracks? We need to stop thinking about the old.
Yeah, I can't disagree. IndyCar has announced they're moving from Greenlight to IXO models for diecast collectibles and accessories starting in 2025.
About time.
Apparently, this is a good move. I don't
follow
follow this,
anything.
but
I don't know.
my understanding is they're more detailed diecast.
I just assumed it was all Matchbox or Hot Wheels.
And then Levi Jones will step down as the Indy Next kind of leader manager directly after the season. Take over as GM of Tony Stewart's Eldora Speedway. Now, he raced with Tony Stewart Racing in USAC, so this makes sense. He had been with USAC for several years before taking over as the Indy Next kind of director guy.
I don't know how much of a loss this is. Obviously, he's had an impact on the resurgence of Indy Lights. Hopefully, it's not a huge loss because what has happened under his leadership has been very good for Indy Lights.
Yes. So will that continue or will we see a fall off?
That's the hope. And another two kind of piggyback. Okay, if Ganassi is in, and now you have Ganassi, Juncos, and Andretti racing in Indy Lights, who could potentially be that next team that dabbles? I'm still surprised that teams that really need help developing talent like RLL and Coin and Ed Carpenter Racing don't dabble in Indy Lights more.
Especially now with the TV package being legitimate and not just streaming on Peacock.
And it would allow you to develop these drivers, or at least maybe technical alliances with Indy Lights teams, is develop these things where you have a pipeline for your talent a little bit. I'm kind of surprised. I know it costs money, but you would think that's a valuable aspect of developing your team. And now with Ganassi jumping into it, we've already seen it prove fruitful for Andretti. Maybe some other teams will dabble in it.
Tweets of the week time. First one from Indy Oreo. Penske ownership has done nothing to change the perception that IndyCar doesn't exist outside Interstate 465. Also, Pato Ward tweeted Pato who after his win in race 1 in the Hy-Vee 250s.
Get the man a billboard.
Colton Herta said this from Jenna Fryer. Colton Herta on the IndyCar season finale in Nashville. There will be a lot of billboards. And then Jay Fry had posted this reflecting on the past 9 years. Verizon NTT entitlements, multiple OEM extensions, AeroKit 18 identity back, rolling 5-year plan, increased car count, on-track performance records, Aeroscreen, 100% renewable race fuel, and hybrid technology. Incredible paddock-wide effort. Chris X. Wright. Lost Fontana, lost Pocono, lost Texas, lost Watkins Glen, lost all international races other than Toronto, failed to find a third OEM by Honda, outdated hybrid system, no 2025 streaming deal, was overtaken by F1, the second most popular form of motorsport in America.
A lot of negatives. I'm going to push back on the outdated hybrid system. Like, you needed a hybrid system.
It is outdated, though.
But
the technology is very rudimentary compared to other hybrids. But you have to start somewhere.
But you have to do it, and if GM and Honda are happy that it's there, regardless of how antiquated it is, then that's a good thing.
All right, time for our random split air driver of the week.
All right, we're going to keep our Mexico theme.
Ooh.
Okay, and we're going to go with David Martinez, not the former baseball player. I think he pitched for Houston, maybe. With a hot second, but no, David Martinez, who raced in the 2006 season of Champ Car. He also appeared in 2007, both years with Forsyth Racing. 3 races total. 2006, he raced at Mexico City. 2007, he appeared in races at Surfers Paradise in Mexico City. He even competed in 2008 in the IRL with Forsyth Pettit Racing, and did a couple races in Indy Lights in 2010 with Genoa Racing. But David Martinez, he holds the record for the best debut ever by a Mexican driver in a premier open wheel series with his 9th place finish at the 2006 Gran Premio Telmex, and that was the race in Mexico City. He now shares that record with Pato O'Ward, who also finished ninth in debut at the 2018 Grand Prix of Sonoma. David Martinez grew up in Monterrey, Mexico. Similar to somebody else.
Yeah.
Did karting for several years, got into Formula 2, did some Formula Renault, Mexican Formula 3, came up the ladder of open wheel racing, did Atlantics in 2004, and appeared late in the season in 2006. He was initially announced to race a third car for the team in 2006, but he ended up replacing an injured Paul Tracy that year, and was idle throughout most of 2007, announced as the driver of the 7 car for Forsythe for the final 2 races. He started 10th and ran as high as 5th in Mexico City, but his gearbox issue on lap 45 prevented him from getting back to the race. He finished 8th at the Grand Prix of Long Beach in 2008. It was his last race in either kart or the IRL. He did some 24 hours of Daytona. Like I said, he did some Indy Lights, finished 8th at Infineon that year. And that was about it. And a guy that had an opportunity in kart, IndyCar, or IRL, didn't perform to the level that he needed to, but very little chance. And you wonder, maybe Pato O'Ward growing up, seeing David Martinez maybe make his way through the Mexican ladder of racing and ended up getting opportunities in Champ Car and the IRL and the Rolex Sports Car Series, could have potentially helped Pato O'Ward in his drive to do the very same thing in IndyCar. So David Martinez, still just 42 years old, a native of Monterrey, Mexico, this week's Random Split Era Driver of the Week.
And a driver I do not recall. In fact, he raced in, of course, the split weekend for IndyCar in 2008. I mean, when it was, post-split.
Correct.
At Long Beach, finished 8th. But yeah, no, I do not recall. Even did two Indy Lights races in 2010 for Genoa Racing.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yes, he was a guy that had a couple opportunities that I've never, ever heard of.
All right, that does it for a marathon episode.
Man.
And literally, this just coming in.
Uh-oh.
This is wild. So IndyCar has announced that there will be a return of alternate tires for the season finale on the Nashville Superspeedway Oval. They did this last year, at Gateway?
Yeah, I was trying to remember where they've done this.
It was Gateway. So there you go. There you have it. That is an interesting twist indeed.
Okay.
Should help the racing if that means they're concerned about passing, I would guess.
Yeah, we'll dabble that more into next week's podcast
for sure,
as we get more details. But yeah, an added twist to the season finale.
All right, for Justin Kinney, I am Caleb Hatch. This wraps up a marathon episode of New Track Record Podcast. We'll be back next week to preview the season finale, the Big Machine Music City Grand Prix presented by Gamebridge, not on the streets of downtown Nashville, but at Nashville Super Speedway. That does it for us. Thanks for joining us on another episode of New Track Record Podcast.